tins guzzlers. Well, I've got to have a pint tonight because it's sort of curry night, and you always have a pint with curry, don't you? I know for most people to have a lager, but I prefer stuff like that. That's an hobgoblin. Oh, and that's an elf. Dobby. Anyways, Dobby's not cooking. Okay, this is just in memory of Dobby. Right, and this is hobgoblin, just simply because that's what I preferred. So tonight we're going to make can't even speak properly yet. No, that's my first drink. Black pepper chicken, which we're going to serve some rice because the wife wants rice with it. But I'm going to have some fennel Laccha paratha that I'm going to make, and we're going to make that part of the way through making the black pepper chicken. So I've got my array of spices and other bits, so let's get on with it. So first off, we're going to marinate our chicken. So to do that, I've got about half a teaspoon of freshly ground black pepper. There will be more black pepper going in. You would only call that little amount black pepper chicken, would you? I've got half a teaspoon of salt. I've got about 6 cloves of garlic, all grated up. I'm going to put in here about, how much is it? Two tablespoons of ginger, so it's going to quite a lot of ginger going in there. Okay, now the chicken, you could use chicken thighs, skinless. Okay, obviously boneless. We're going to use breast. So the only other thing that's going to go into this marinade, I'm doing this first because the chicken wants to marinate for about half an hour. So let's just get that in there, and then I want 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. So 1, wait, that went really everywhere. 2, and now all I'm going to do is I'm going to take my chicken breast and I'm going to chop it up into bite-sized pieces and chuck it in there, mix it all together and set it aside for half an hour while we get on with some other stuff. Oh, and then another drink. So I'm just having me Jamie moment. Well, just about any cook you watch on telly moment, to be honest. I'm just going to make sure all them bite-sized bits of chicken are lovely. What do you feel? I haven't had a drink yet. Lovely and coated in that marinade, and then like I say, we're going to set that to one side. Don't know why I'm talking like that. For half an hour. Okay, and then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to prepare our spice mix, which obviously will be going in it later. We've also got some other ingredients here for a masala. I'll wash my hand now. So, excuse me, I've got a little shallow pan here, my omelette pan. I'm going to be using this to cook my parathas in, but I'm also going to use this to roast my spices. So we're starting off with the aforementioned black peppercorns, and of them I want 2 teaspoons of black peppercorns. Now I'm going to tell you, don't go bloody everywhere. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the history of pepper. So black pepper. Black pepper is an important part of Sri Lankan and Southern Indian cooking. Okay, and actually black pepper is the thing that started off the spice trade, and it is still the most traded spice in the world. At one time it was worth more than gold. All right, so black pepper. Next thing, some cumin seeds. I want, how much of that? A teaspoon of cumin seeds. Okay, these are all going to end up in the spice blender, spice blender. Okay, after we've toasted them. Some fennel seeds. I'll be wanting them later. Okay, a teaspoon of them, because they're going to go in my paratha, remember. So I'm going to put that over there. And then I've got about 3 cloves. They're going in there. Then coriander seeds. Coriander seeds, I want tablespoon of them. Okay, in they go. And then the final thing I'm going to put in there is one dried Kashmiri chilli. So all we're going to do now is just going to lightly roast them. Got that peppercorn down there. Lightly roast them, okay. And then we're going to let them cool before we put them in the blender. So I'm going to pause here, and then I'm going to tell you a bit more about black pepper, because I know you can't wait. You better not turn off at this point. So while my spices are roasting, as it were, I've started slicing 2 onions, 2 medium-ish onions, okay, because they're going to be going in the main masala dish, if you like. Okay, the only other ingredients I'm going to need are some chilies. Now, it's up to you how many chilies you want. I'm only putting 2 green chilies in. You're going to want some coconut oil, some curry leaves, some turmeric, some cassia bark, which, if you can't get cassia bark, because I know not everybody is sophisticated as me, you can use cinnamon, but it's not quite the same. And the fennel seeds are there for me paratha. Okay, and I think that's about it other than that onion. Oh, and you'll want some tomatoes. Now, 2 chopped tomatoes, or you can use tin tomatoes, or you can do like me and forget about that and put tomato puree in. So, when these are getting nice and aromatic, which of course I have no idea whether they are or not, you're going to turn the heat off, okay? We don't want them cooking, you know, pinging all over the place. I'm just going to let them cool. Now you could transfer them on something smaller, or, you know, like a dish, so it cools off quicker, okay? And then you want your spice blender and all that lot's going to go in there. So, black pepper. Archaeological evidence shows that black pepper was being used for, well, going back to at least 2000 BC in India. It is known that pepper was exported very early on. Okay, we know obviously later on it was. And it appears that there was trade routes between India and Egypt where the Egyptians took in peppercorns. And in fact, interesting note for you, peppercorns were even found shoved up the nose of Ramesses the Great when he was mummified. Presumably didn't shove up his nose while he was still alive. I don't think he'd have liked that. But no, so his mummy contained, up his nostrils, black pepper. Right, bit of pause there. Need another beer. Well, I need another sip of beer. Right, my spices are in blender, but while I've got that pan, I'm going to put about half a teaspoon of fennel seeds. If you remember, I said we're going to put some fennel seeds into my paratha. So I've got them in there, and we're going to just toast them in a minute. But first off, we're going to take all them spices and we're going to turn it into a powder. So, by AD 40 or 40 AD, the Romans were like big on spices and trading all over, well, trading all over the Roman Empire. And one of the main spices, which they were very, very keen on, was pepper. Although not all, apparently Pliny the Elder said they were bloody horrible. But most Romans really liked it. And Apicius, who I've done some of his recipes, Apicius, in his recipe book, over 80% of his recipes include pepper. Okay, that's done. So that's done. I'm just going to roast these, and then we'll start on cooking off our onions. Right, so my fennel seeds, I'm just letting them cool. Okay, we'll probably crush them in my mortar rather than the spice blender because they get lost in there. So now I've got my nice big deep pan that I like doing my Indian things in. And what I'm going to do is to that, now you could use ghee if you wish. Okay, I'm going to add about a tablespoon of coconut oil. Okay, try not to get oil everywhere. And then into that, I'm going to add some curry leaves. Now, unfortunately, I've only got dried ones, okay? But if you've got like 10 fresh curry leaves, I'm going to put quite a bit in because obviously these aren't fresh. Okay, can't actually buy them fresh. You can buy them frozen. Okay, anyway, they go in there, and then we want about 8 centimetres of cassia bark, sorry. That's like 2 bits in one. Okay, so I'll put that in there, and I'm just going to put another bit. Actually, just put another bit. All right, so that goes in there. And what else do I want in there? So curry leaves, cassia bark. Oh, a little bit of salt. Where's my salt on? Oh, I'll find me. Oh, there you go. That'll do. A little bit of salt. And then we're going to put them onions in there. And we're just going to cook them off. Just while I remember, my chilies, when we put them in later, what I've done here is I've actually sliced my chilies open so it gets some of the chili flavour out. But the main heat and depth of flavour comes from the black pepper. Okay, so what we're going to do is just gently, I don't know why I'm going in that drawer, long drawer. We're just going to gently saute those onions. Okay, we want the onions to start browning a little bit, but we obviously want them cooked. Right, so I wonder what that was. That's a brown looking curry leaf. So at this stage it's just a matter of cooking this off. We're going to make the paratha dough in a bit because that needs to rest half an hour. Okay, now, so I was telling you about the Romans using spice. Well, when the Visigoths were threatening to sack Rome, the Romans sort of said, here you go, here's some gold, here's some silver, and here's a load of pepper, because how valuable pepper was. And the Visigoths said, oh, okay, we'll back off for a bit, which they did for a bit, and then they went ahead and did it anyway. So eventually, at this point, obviously the Romans were running the spice trade, mainly transporting pepper, black pepper. But at this point, obviously, fall of the Roman Empire, it then sort of fell to other groups. Mainly Islamic groups, so the Arabs took over and they became the dominant trade in pepper. Right, so I'm just going to turn that down a bit. We don't want to cook these too quickly. So my onions are cooking. I've put my fennel seeds in the water, and we're just sort of crushing them up. In the paint, and keep pinging out. So I'm just going to tip these into a bowl. Okay, put that over there. So we've found about the Arabs taking over the spice trade and the pepper trade. Now, pepper was just so, valuable. The Arabs were a little bit naughty because they didn't want anybody else muscling in and getting it from India, because that was where you got the pepper from, India. Okay, I'll come to that. I'll explain about the different peppers in a minute. They made up a little story. They basically said that to get pepper, you had to go to certain groves of India where the pepper trees grew, but they were guarded by poisonous serpents that would attack anybody who went anywhere near the trees. But they knew how to do it so that they didn't get killed. But to get the pepper, one of the ways in which they did it so they didn't get killed was they would burn the trees, set the trees alight. Now this had two effects. One was, obviously the serpents went, bugger this, I'm off out of here, so you could go in. But also it blackened the pepper, and hence it was a black pepper. Just simply because they didn't want anybody else muscling in on the India pepper trade. By the 10th century, pepper was really important in Europe. And in fact, King Ethelred II, who was about 12 something, I think, it might be a bit earlier than that, when the Germans, or German traders came and said they wanted to do business, you know, spice trade, he basically said, well, I'll tell you what, lads, you select me. Ooh, sounds a bit familiar to our current leaders, isn't it? Select me a bung and you can come in and do what you like. He says try not to be political, but it does sort of have a bit of ramifications with Boris and Co and all the COVID crap, doesn't it? But he said give us a bung, £10 worth of pepper, as in weight, and you can do what you like in the spice trade. So anyway, that's me political rant over with. And I'll better pause here. So I've got my fennel seeds in there. Let's get on, while this is cooking down, making our paratha dough. So I put my flour, 150 grams of plain flour in there. Should be whole wheat flour, traditionally. I'm going to add a little bit of salt. And then what we're going to do is we've got about 75 mils of water. But we don't want the dough too sticky, so I'm going to add a little bit of the water and start kneading this in. And we basically want a fairly non-sticky dough, okay? Now, I've reduced this recipe by half, simply because the wife won't, oh, I can't eat bread at the minute, too much carbohydrate. Not very well at the minute, missus. Actually, I think I've caught the cold again that I had several weeks ago. Now she's just been bad with it all week, starting to get over it. But that's not why she won't eat carbs. Anyway, so I'm just going to carry on kneading this in. So I'm just going to give that a little bit of a stir. So they're getting soft now and a bit translucent, but like I said, we want to brown them off. Okay, so if need be, you can add a little bit more water, but what we don't want is a sticky dough. We want a dry dough. Now, we were talking about our King Ethelred II. I almost tipped my water over there. Allowed the German spice traders in. In 1497, the Portuguese king, I don't know who he was, sent Vasco da Gama offered to find a sea route to India with the instructions of go find me Christians and spices. So it shows you how important spices were. You know, he was trying to spread Christianity, but by the way, while you're at it, go and get me some spice, won't you? And by the way, we're not having flashbacks to the June movie. I haven't seen that yet. Apparently be quite good. I've seen the original, but got a sting in it, if you know what sting is. Anyway, so by the 1500s, 1600s, Portugal was importing approximately 2 million kilos of pepper a year. I think this is almost there. Today, even though it's mainly grown in India, comes really from India, come to that in a minute. I told you I'll tell you about different peppers. I might have to get a little bit more water in it. You can see here, although having said that, it's starting to get a little bit sticky, so I might not. I'll see how we go. But anyway, just to finish off talking about this spice trade, currently the country that is the biggest exporter of pepper, Vietnam. Okay, in 2013, it exported between 130,000 and 135,000 tonnes of pepper, which is like a value of about 900 billion. Right? So anyway, that I think is probably just about wet enough. So I'll tell you about the different varieties of pepper in a minute. Actually, I forgot to point out how we made that dough, and then I added a little bit more water and it was a bit too sticky, so I added a little bit of flour. What we now need to do is let it rest for 30 minutes, okay? It's obviously not going to rise, you know, prove like bread would, but we let it rest for a bit, and then we'll be rolling it and shaping it, because the paratha is a sort of flaky fried, well, you say fried, it's not fried like as in oil or such. It's on one of them, you know, flatbed pans, which I ain't got, but that's close to it, that omelette pan. But it's sort of it's sort of like layered, and so it sort of can be a little bit flaky depending on how you cook it. Anyway, so I said to you, so I'm still browning this, starting to go a little bit brown now. Okay, when that's browned, that's when we would add our whole tomato chopped up, if we were adding tomatoes. So I'll tell you, pepper all actually comes from one particular plant. That's a slight lie, but you'll find out why in a minute. The pepper plant, which is native to India, okay, Piper nigrum, actually supplies all the different types of pepper, apart from the other one that I've lied about at the minute. So your black peppercorns, green peppercorns, white pepper, all that lot and the other, they all come from that same plant, and they're not different varieties of that plant. They are all exactly the same drupe. Okay, they are all from the fruiting body. Okay, so we're using black pepper. Now, black pepper is basically the still green, unripe drupe, it's called. It's like the fruiting body, if you like, of the pepper plant. Okay, and that is what forms the black pepper that we know today. Okay, so it's the unripe fruit. Okay, now white pepper is also from the same plant, like I said, but this time they let it ripen, but then they treat it to remove, so a bit like a normal fruit might have a pip inside or pips inside, the pepper, white pepper, they actually, after it's ripened, they have a process which strips off that darker, there's only a thin layer of skin on the outside, they strip that off, and so basically you're just left with the seed. White pepper is more commonly used in Chinese, Thai and Portuguese cuisine, and because you haven't got the outer skin on it, white pepper has a lot different flavour to the other varieties of pepper. So there you go, there's your black pepper and your white pepper, but hold on, there's more. So, excuse me, so my onions are browning now, so at this point we will take our 2 chopped tomatoes and we would add them. Okay, I'm having a generous portion of tomato puree, and what you do with them chopped tomatoes is cook them till they go all mushy. Okay, and they're starting to cook. So this won't take too long, just warm it through. So we've done black pepper, which is the unripe fruits, as it were. We've done white pepper, which is the ripe fruits but the skin removed. Then we get to green pepper. Now, green pepper, if you remember, black pepper is actually the green, but the way it's preserved, it goes black. In the case of green peppercorns, we're using the unripe fruits, and we're trying to retain the green colour. So that's down to how they preserve it. Right, I'm just going to, at this point, chuck in my 2 chillies. Now you can, if you want, slice your chillies up. Okay, we're not doing that. That's going 2 in there, and we're just going to cook that through for a little bit. So green one, they quite often would, I mean, although there's some places don't like it, they'll preserve it with sulphur dioxide, and that helps keep the green colour in, but they can freeze dry it and the canning processes, all just to make sure it's preserved, but keeps green colour. However, having said that, quite often the Thai and the Tamil use the fresh unripe green peppercorns, okay, in their dishes, and apparently it is a spicy and fresh flavour with a bright aroma. However, if you don't preserve them, they do go off quite quickly. So generally, most of us around the world start to catch a little bit on the bottom. Just turn the heat down. I'm just going to whip that off of there because that is starting to catch. So I'm now going to add a teaspoon of turmeric, and I'm going to add all that spice powder that we made earlier. Okay, and we're just going to quickly just mix that in. Try not to let the onions escape. Now, it's very dry at this point. Okay, and then what we're going to do, now we've mixed that in, we're going to take our chicken with all the marinade, and in that goes. And I'm just going to mix that in to thoroughly coat all that chicken. And at this point, I might add a little dash of water, I think, because it is very, very dry. Although this generally is a dry dish, you can have it with a little bit of sauce. So I'm just going to add in some water into that, because like I say, it was catching a little bit on that pan. So that, once that's all nicely mixed in, he says try not to burn his hand on the handle, what we're going to do is we're then just going to put the lid on, and we're just going to let it cook through. And again, I'm just going to add a little bit more water. We're going to let it cook through 30 minutes on a nice low heat. Okay, and during that cooking, I'm going to make my paratha, and I'll tell you about the final two types of peppercorn, one of which isn't from the pepper plant. So I've moved my chicken, black pepper chicken, to a back ring so you can see what I'm doing. So I'm going to take this dough, which I'll just stick into it, and like I said, I've reduced this down to make 3. Okay, so I'm just going to divide that into 3 balls. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to roll them out as thin as possible. So I've lightly floured my surface. Okay, we want to roll these into a nice little circle. There's a variety of ways in which you can make these so that you can shape them. Okay, in fact, the recipe that I'm using actually uses a different method to get these sort of layers. So I've used the recipe, but I'm using a different method of getting the layers. So I'm trying to get this into a circle, and it's not doing too well. Okay, and like I say, we want it nice and thin. And then what we're going to do is, I've got some coconut oil there. Coconut oil will set, you know, so you need to warm it up. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lightly brush it with some coconut oil, and then I'm going to, he says, now letting this brush go and touch everything, sprinkle it over with some flour. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start folding it into thin pleats. So I'm just folding it backwards and forwards. You can see how it's being a bit of a bugger here. Okay, so I'm just folding it, so I'll end up with a long strip concertina strip. Make a funny noise. Okay, so you can see there I've got that thin strip. I'm just going to fold that a bit over. And then what I'm going to do is I'm now going to create a nice little tight spiral. Okay, so I'm going to do that to the other two balls, and then we're going to roll that. So I'm going to take my tava, except it's not a tava, it's normally a pan, and I'm going to put it on quite a high-ish heat. Okay, and then I'll take my spiral, as it were, cut a cinnamon bun, doesn't it? And what we're going to do is now we're going to roll that back out into our final paratha, which, although the layers do appear to sort of merge together, that should create a nice flaky texture because of the layers in it. So when we've got it out nice and thin, what we're going to do is then place it into our pan, which is now getting nice and hot. You can see our black pepper chicken cooking away nicely there. Now, while it's in there doing that, we're going to take some coconut oil and we're just going to lightly brush it over. And then we're just going to get a little pinch of flour and just sprinkle some flour over the top. Now what we're looking for is that it may start bubbling, but we're getting them sort of like golden browny blacky bits. We don't really want black because that's burnt. And what we'll do, once that other side is cooked, we're going to flip it, and then we're going to brush that top surface with some coconut oil and sprinkle some flour, and then we'll do a final flip, and that will be our final Fennel Laccha paratha. And that's still cooking, steaming well. I better check it actually. I don't know really how well you can see that, but it's starting to bubble up. So at this point, what we do is we flip it over, and then like I said, we're just going to lightly brush that side with some coconut oil, probably went a bit heavy on that, and then sprinkle some flour on top. And then once that other side has started to brown a little bit in the classic brown spots, we'll flip it for a final time, and then that's cooked. I've rolled out my next one ready to go. Got one more to do. That's cooking nicely. Still got about 15 minutes to go. So I'm going to put my rice on in my microwave cooker in a second. Traditionally you wouldn't necessarily have this with rice. You might have it with some sliced red onion, which I haven't got any. If you didn't have curry leaves, you could add some coriander, again that's optional, and you could serve it with one of your typical favourite sort of side dishes. We're not, so it's going to be rice and these fennel flavoured parathas. So we've almost finished our first paratha. Yeah, I think that one will do. So in that goes, like I say, we brush it with some oil. Okay, now actually I've just realised I haven't told you about the last two, that noise in the background by the way is my microphone, the last two peppercorns. So you can get red peppercorns. Now the red peppercorns are actually the ripe fruits, the ripe peppercorns or peppers, and they're normally preserved in like brine and vinegar, and that therefore gives them that colour. Now our final variety, which you may have come across, which I must admit I never heard of, is pink peppercorns. Now pink peppercorns are not from the pepper tree or pepper plant. Remember that's the Piper or Piper nigrum or nigrum. pink peppercorns come from a Peruvian pepper tree, which belongs to a completely different family. Okay, I'm not talking science here when I say family. Okay, it's the Shyness mole or mole, which is very similar to or relative of the Brazilian pepper tree. Okay, which is the Shyness, so they both belong to the same genus. You seem to be technical here. Shyness terribiliferolis or something like that. Okay, they're actually part of the cashew family. So you do have to watch pink peppercorns if you've got a nut allergy. If you've got a tree nut allergy, you probably don't want to have pink peppercorns because it can give you an anaphylactic shock. So I've got just about 7 or 8 minutes before what we'll do is we'll take the lid off of that and let it dry out a bit. Like I said, if you want it with a bit of sauce on it, you can not let it dry out. Okay, you can see that's bubbling up nicely. So I'm just going to flip that, coat that one, and flour it. And then what I thought we'd do is we'll take a bit of this one, which is our first one. I don't know how well you can see that. It is sort of quite flaky, crisp on the outside. Definitely get that fennel flavour through. Really nice. I think this would be nice if we had a bit of sauce with that, to be honest. So that's our fennel laccha. Laccha, by the way, means ring, because remember we made a ring. Paratha. So got these cook off. Almost there now. Right, the parathas are cooked. I've taken the lid off of the chicken, and at this point we're just going to cook it, just to cook it to dryness. Although to be honest, it is pretty dry. Okay, so what I'm actually going to do is, rather than cook it anymore, I'm going to turn the heat off. Okay, and then we're just going to put that lid back on for a few minutes while we just get ready to serve everything else. So I've got my paratha there ready, got some bowls. So we just let that just for a few minutes, just to soak up them final spice and chili aromas. And then what we'll do is we'll serve it up and we'll have a little tasting. And like I say, normally if you had some red onions, slice some red onions, raw red onions, sprinkle them on top, or just have it like it is. Okay, so I'm just going to get the Mrs. Rice sorted out. Got my paratha, and then we'll serve it and taste. So here we go, let's have a taste. The chilies are sort of disintegrated, but I've obviously not put these in here. I've tried to remove the cassia bark, although I've got a feeling there's one bit that's still left in here. The curry leaves, probably try and avoid them if you can. But it's obviously very hot because it's come out of there. You've definitely got the heat from the chilli. That's a curry leaf, don't really want to eat that. But you've also got that pepperiness, if you like. So that's a different sort of heat. Alright. He says we're going to get a bit of onion stuck in it. So you definitely got that heat from the pepper, a bit of heat from the chilli, but the heat from the pepper is different, and you also get those other complex flavours from the pepper. So there you go. There's our black pepper chicken served with fennel laccha paratha or jasmine rice. So I'm going to go enjoy that now and finish off my beer, because although it's not really a curry, it is effectively a curry and a pint.